Good afternoon, everyone. This is Darlene with Generations Health. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar, Nancy Reagan's Dementia Caregiving Approach, Helpful or Harmful for You, presented by Jennifer FitzPatrick. Before we get started, there's just a few things I need to cover with you. And the first is we are so grateful to have the Village at Rockville sponsoring today's webinar. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite Rochelle Clark to join me. But first, I need to cover a couple things with you. The first is, for today's program, everyone is going to be muted, and that is simply to eliminate any background noise. However, this is an interactive program, so we do encourage you to ask questions, to answer questions. If you have comments about the discussion that is taking place, please feel free to communicate with us, and you can do so by utilizing the chat feature. As a reminder, to find chat, if you scroll across the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a little banner that pops up, and on that is a bubble that says chat. When you click on that, the chat feature is going to launch, and it's most likely going to pop up on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, when you use chat today, your questions, comments, answers, those are only going to be seen by Rochelle, Jennifer, and myself, and the reason for that is privacy. However, Jen is great about going through the chat and making sure that she's answering any questions that you have, and also taking into account the comments that you may be sharing with us. So please feel free to ask away and comment away. All right, as I mentioned, we are so grateful to have the Village at Rockville sponsoring today's program, and I'd like to ask Rochelle Clark to unmute herself as she's going to share a little bit of information with you this afternoon. Rochelle?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's program. We are delighted to have you all, and just wanted to tell you a little bit about our memory support program in assisted living here at the Village at Rockville. In light of today's topic on dementia, wanted to let you know that our goal really is to create an environment that supports residents with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia-related diagnosis. We really do tailor our daily activities really based on the resident's previous life. And we really provide a comprehensive program of activities designed to meet the resident's physical, emotional, spiritual needs in our assisted living. We offer 50 private suites. 32 of them are dedicated to our memory support. And our rates you'll find, should you reach out to me, I will be sure to leave my information in the chat. Our rates are all inclusive of all of the services, to include the 24/7 nursing, licensed nursing staff, housekeeping, all the meals, utilities, laundry care, and we even have on site a medical center, our own clinic, as well as an outpatient physical therapy, and offer a service called My Potential at Home. I will be delighted to share more information with you, especially as it relates to COVID and what we're doing to safeguard our residents. For more information, you can always visit our website at thevillageatrockville.org, or simply contact me directly, and I'll again leave my information in the chat. But before I go, if you'll allow me to, I would like to share with you just a little video displaying what we have to offer in memory support. Enjoy. What you see here is a gathering place, which is really an open floor plan for residents to visit with their families and friends. And right now, we are restricted to visitors. Residents can still gather with each other and participate in activities daily in the common area. On our memory repair unit, we have a quiet room. As you know, some residents may have any kind of behavior that we need to intervene, and that is known as neurologic. We also have a memory garden right off the memory support unit, which is a really nice place for residents to get some sun, do some walking. We even have a plant club on our campus that many of them participate in as well.
Rochelle, excuse me, it's Darlene. The volume on your end was a little bit loud, so we're not able to hear you. I'm not sure if you're going to share another video or not.
Oh, I'm so sorry. This is the only video I'm going to show. I apologize. So thank you so much for your time. And now back to you, Darlene.
Great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. And again, thank you for sponsoring today's program. Okay, we are going to jump in, but first let me give you a little bit of information about our presenter today. She is the author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, and a longtime gerontology instructor at Johns Hopkins University's Certificate on Aging program. She is one of less than 800 certified speaking professionals worldwide and has been featured in national media such as the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, U.S. News and World Report, CBS, ABC, and many more. When she's not working, she spends her time as a below average first mate on her boat. Please join me in welcoming from Kent Island, Maryland, Jennifer L. FitzPatrick, MSW, LCSW-C, CSP.
Well, thank you, Darlene and Rochelle. Thank you again for the Village at Rockville sponsoring today's program. This is a topic that I really enjoy speaking about, talking about our former First Lady, Nancy Reagan, one of the very first public dementia caregivers. And in fact, I dedicate about half of Cruising Through Caregiving to talking about how she took care of President Ronald Reagan. And you may remember, or you may not remember, depending on how old you might be, but President Reagan was diagnosed with, or at least he became publicly shared, he and Mrs. Reagan shared publicly, that he was diagnosed in 1994 with Alzheimer's disease. And so Nancy Reagan became very much the first, one of the very few first public figures to share with us her journey and her story. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from her situation. Now, since then, we've had countless dementia family caregivers share their public stories. And one being Kimberly Williams Paisley. She is, you may remember her, she's been in many, many television shows and movies, but probably most famous for Father of the Bride movies. We have Seth and Lauren Rogan, who are, millennial caregivers, actually took care of her mom. We have Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has been really open. David Hyde Pierce, so many different public figures have shared their stories. But Nancy Reagan, many of us probably don't realize, or some of us may realize, she was really one of the first. And it was a very brave endeavor. A lot of people, and some people may remember this and some people may not, it was a topic that a lot of people felt a lot of shame about. People didn't want to talk about dementia. People hid dementia. They were very, very closed about it. And so I believe Nancy Reagan did a good job of shedding light on this as a public figure, and something that really gave a lot for all of us to be thinking about, and for public figures since then to be thinking about when they go through dementia and caregiving experiences with their older loved ones. So what did Nancy Reagan do? And Nancy Reagan and President Reagan went through this experience together from 1994 to 2004. That's about average. For somebody who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis, the person often does live 8, 9, and 10 years. Sometimes it's a shorter period of time, and sometimes it's longer, but 10 years is around the average that somebody will live with the condition. Now, the diagnosis was made public to all of us in 1994, but I don't know that we necessarily know exactly how long he's had symptoms. A lot of people don't either get diagnosed or even share the information privately with friends and family, let alone public. So I think it's safe to assume that it's possible President Reagan had the condition before 1994. So what did Mrs. Reagan do, and what can we learn from it? So I'd like to encourage everybody to write in your comments, write in your questions, write in your examples. And again, the chapter on dementia in Cruising Through Caregiving talks in detail about all of what we're going to discuss today. But today, of course, we're going to go into more detail and more specific examples. So Mrs. Reagan's, one of her strategies was to keep President Reagan at home. And she was famously interviewed about would she ever consider placing President Reagan in senior living or some type of situation outside their home. And they lived in Bel Air, California. And she was adamant, she was absolutely adamant that no, we're never moving the president out of our home. So I want everybody to be thinking about that. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? So take a few moments to think about it and feel free to write in, what do you think? Do you think that that makes sense for you? And do you think that that made sense for Mrs. Reagan? Because a lot of people begin dementia caregiving and they have this idea. Yes, so we've got one person writing in, try to keep them with loved ones. Another person's writing in, if able to keep it home, I think it's truly beneficial. Okay, so a lot of us do strive for this. We want to keep our loved one at home as much as we possibly can. And in fact, Mrs. Reagan said she would never place her husband, and at least to my knowledge, she never did, that he remained in their Bel Air home. So gosh, I've got a lot of people that said, do not, definitely keep that person at home. And Liz brings up, I think the obvious, the elephant in the room. She had the financial resources to support him 24/7 at home. So we're going to talk about that too. Joan said, we moved into a senior living so you could get help with your husband. So that's another strategy. So Mary's saying family is still somewhat familiar even if the person has dementia. So a lot of us make this promise. And in Cruising Through Caregiving, I call it the promise with a capital T and a capital P, the promise. Because a lot of us will promise and cite our wedding vows. Some of us will say, well, I married my spouse for sickness and in health, and this is the sickness part, and it's best for me to keep him home, and that's where he would want to be. A lot of us will make that promise. A lot of us in an emotional moment, we might promise somebody when they're first diagnosed or even before they're diagnosed that please never take me out of the house. I want to die at home. I want to be home. I never want to be somewhere that I don't live in a place with my family. So a lot of us will make this promise, the promise, capital T, capital P, with a great amount of emotion. For many of us, culture plays into this decision in our family or in our religion or our race, that culture that we come from really frowns upon bringing someone out of a home, a private home. What happens to a lot of us is I believe that we don't always understand what we are agreeing to. I don't think we always understand what we are agreeing to. Now, when I say that, what I mean is think about if you are married. On the day that you got married, did you really understand what marriage was going to be? I know that I didn't. I'm happily married. My husband and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary, but I look back 20 years ago and I just think I didn't even know my husband. I didn't even really love him the way that I love him now. But I didn't really totally comprehend what marriage was going to mean. And I think that happens to a lot of us when we have children. We think, I want to have children, but I don't completely understand what the commitment is. I know that even when I got into this field and I graduated from social work school, I didn't completely understand what that was going to be about. And so I think for many of us as family caregivers, whether we're a spouse, whether we're an adult child, a grandchild, a niece, when we make a promise to keep that person at home, I don't know that we completely understand what we're getting into because, like some of you said, Mrs. Reagan probably knew, even though she maybe didn't understand the emotional and how taxing it would be to keep a loved one with dementia at home, she was going to have help that many of us maybe weren't necessarily going to have. So I got a couple people writing in, a couple people writing in. So Eric says, it's possible to, when the ability to care for that person is important and knowing what other options are available. Grace says, it depends. Is it a safety hazard for your loved one? So all of these are such good remarks. Mrs. Reagan had a lot of resources that probably many of us did not have. And so she might have been able to understand the promise a little bit better. Publicly, it's known that not only did she have doctors and nurses and nursing assistants in the home, but if and when President Reagan ever tried to wander out of their home in Bel Air, California, I'm guessing that it would be the Secret Service that would have stopped him. Whereas for many of us, if we promise to keep our loved one at home and they start to wander, or they start to keep the stove on when we're in a different room, they put the stove on when we're in a different room, or they light a candle, keeping that promise can be really exhausting. If they're up in the middle of the night, walking around thinking that they have to go to work when they haven't worked in 25 years. These promises can be so incredibly difficult and almost impossible to keep. Another strategy that Mrs. Reagan believed in is that she kept her loved one with dementia out of the public eye and away from many other people. And I'm curious what you all think about that strategy. And again, all of the strategies we're talking about, she has talked about publicly. And a couple of sources that I want to share with you that I based some of this on is there's an article called The Long Goodbye by J.D. Hyman that you can look up online, and As the Shadows Fell by Thomas and Clift. So those are two articles that I based a lot of these strategies that I discuss on. So do you think it's a good idea that your loved one should be kept away from others, out of the public eye? So interesting, Joan saying when her loved one was diagnosed that they signed up for a senior living community. They have a whole new set of friends and both their lives are richer for it. So keeping them away from others probably would have maybe not been the best thing, since he's around others, he's being around others. It's interesting. Sharon says it's hard for all involved. Having a good medical provider to help with different options or have the person move to a higher level of care, knowing when that's appropriate. Absolutely, Sharon. So I can certainly understand with President Reagan, there was an image issue. This is somebody that was the president. He was an actor. She was an actor, I guess we're supposed to call female actors now. And in fact, a little fun fact that you may or may not know about the Reagans, that they appeared together in a movie called A Hellcats of the Navy in 1957. And Mrs. Reagan, formerly Nancy Davis, she actually played a nurse in that film, she and Ronald Reagan starred in that film together. So a little bit of foreshadowing, perhaps art imitating life, but for her, she was very sensitive to that. And my hope is that for many of us, we're less sensitive to that. Now, I think you want to be mindful, and I see this all the time on Facebook and social media and Instagram, people sharing pictures of their loved ones who have dementia when they maybe aren't feeling their best, or videos when the person might be doing something that might have embarrassed them if they were able to say yes or no. I think right now most of us are pretty sensitive when we might want to share something on social media. We ask others, are you okay if I put this picture up? Are you okay if I put this video up? When somebody has Alzheimer's or another type of dementia in the advanced stages, most of the time that person is not able to say, sure, post it or don't post it. And they often aren't going to even really know what social media is. So what I'm saying is perhaps being mindful that you want to have dignified photos and videos of your loved one, but totally keeping them isolated from others. I understand the spirit of why Mrs. Reagan felt that this was appropriate, that she wanted to keep the image of her husband as president, as a successful actor, in the forefront of people's minds, didn't want people to think of him as sickly or not as the way he used to be. But for the rest of us, I think it's so important that we make sure that others can see our loved ones and spend time with our loved ones and keep in touch and be mindful of how beneficial that is, not just to you as the family caregiver, but also to the loved one who is going to be benefiting from seeing other people. Sharon's saying, I think it depends on the individuals. It could be overwhelming for the person with dementia and cause anxiety for both. That's true too. So large crowds, which for most people who are older adults right now with COVID and everything happening, we're trying to avoid large crowds anyway. We're trying to make gatherings small. So, but especially at the holiday time, which we're coming up on, that a lot of us feel like, wow, I mean, if we're having 7 or 8 people over for Christmas or Hanukkah or a holiday, a New Year's party, even if it's a small group, that might be too many people for your loved one. So you want to keep your eye on that person. Do they seem stressed out? Is their facial expression smiley or is it frowning? Are they clenching their fists? So being mindful of, is this person doing okay around others? But I do think it's important not to isolate. I'm not sure how to pronounce this person's name, but no, not a good idea. A close friend did not want others to know when he went to assisted living, has since changed, and the patient should be allowed input for sure, absolutely. So what else did Mrs. Reagan do? What was her strategy? A strategy that she shared publicly, again, in a lot of interviews and articles. And she did a really extensive interview with Larry King, which I drew some of these strategies from. That be with your loved one who has dementia all the time. And she talked a lot about how she tried not to be out. And she talked once in particular about a time that she went to an eye doctor appointment, I believe it was. She went to her own doctor's appointment and she came back and he had fallen. And she felt really bad about that. And I would say that this is not a great strategy for most of us, that we want there to be somebody with our loved one who has dementia. But if it's always us, if we're never getting a break, the quality of the time we're spending together, I bet, is being compromised. If we are spending all of our time with our loved one who has dementia 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for an undefined length of time, a year, 5 years, 10 years, it's probably not good for you and it's probably not good for them. Your loved one with dementia is going to drive you crazy with questioning, asking you the same questions over and over again, repeating the same stories over and over again, needing help with remembering what week it is or remembering how to use a fork or a spoon. If you're the only one tending to them, your nerves are going to be fried. And so you being the only one or feeling like you can never be away from them, for most of us, it's not healthy. It leads to burnout, and it also leads to what we call compassion fatigue, where you stop having empathy for your loved one, where you might just feel angry with your loved one. You know it's not his or her fault, but you feel angry anyway. Oh, interesting. So we have somebody sharing that they have a friend that was in the public eye prior to having dementia and initially was really afraid of sharing the diagnosis. And when we talk about Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, she was really open about her situation with her husband, John, when John had a so-called girlfriend at the senior living community in which he resided. And now she has personally shared that she is herself. And so I'm, Glenn Campbell shared, I think that we're seeing a trend of people saying, look, this isn't anybody's fault, that there's nothing to be ashamed about. We don't want to blame and shame. We want to say that this is just something that's happening. And certainly maybe they don't want to be around tons of people all the time, but I think it's a good idea for people to have some friends, to have some family, to if you're only seeing that one family caregiver, that wife, that son, that is probably not good for you and it's not good for them. While your loved one who has dementia is probably getting on your nerves sometimes, I bet you're getting on theirs too. Because when we only see one other face, it's probably just not good. It's nice for somebody to see fresh faces, hear fresh new voices. Friends can't handle all your burdens. What do you think of that? And this was taken out of a conversation that Mrs. Reagan had with a Larry King. And Larry King and she were talking about I believe it was from the Larry King interview, and she talked openly about that she has so many wonderful friends that would check in on her, but when the friends call, don't just complain. Don't only utilize your friends for venting. What do you think about that? Being around them is important, but probably not all the time, and being right now is hard to do. Friends can't handle all your burdens. So I think what she's getting at, and I would tend to agree with this, is, and there's an exercise in Cruising Through Caregiving called the MET exercise. And if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, you can get that exercise plus all the other exercises completely for free. Get hard copies that you can download and print or you put on your computer. But friends can't handle all your burdens. When your friends call, when your neighbors ask if they can help, let them. But at the same time, don't only talk about caregiving. Ask them how they are. Talk to them about what's going on in their life. Reminisce about old stories. Talk about a movie that you both saw or a book that you both read. And Mrs. Reagan, I thought, was very insightful when she shared this, because friends sometimes feel like they want to help you, they want to be there for you, and they want to hear how you're doing with caregiving. But in particular, if they've never been a caregiver, or specifically if they have never been a dementia caregiver, they really can't put themselves in your shoes. And so you want to accept if they want to send food, if they want to arrange to have your snow removed during the winter so you don't have to worry about that, if they want to come over and stay with your spouse so you can go get your hair cut, all of that is wonderful. But if you're only venting and you're only asking them for favors, that might not be the best strategy. So I would say I like this strategy of Mrs. Reagan's. Don't ever leave your loved one alone. And she was, I think, right on about that, especially in the middle or advanced stages. In the early stages, I know that there can be some gray area, but people, even in the early stages of Alzheimer's or another dementia, have made the mistake of saying, you know, I'm going to just run to the grocery store for 15 minutes. I'm going to just go pick up my kid from school. I'm going to just go run over to the neighbors to borrow something. And they come back and their loved one is not there. This can be very dangerous in extreme weather. This can be very dangerous if you live near a major highway. This can be really dangerous overall, because if your loved one leaves that house, it's very possible that you won't get them back for a while, that they might wander off, that they might become dehydrated, or they might get frostbite. There is a lot, there's countless examples. And when I've spoken as a guest to support groups, I'll bring up this topic sometimes. Just be so careful. Don't leave your loved one alone. And so many people will say, well, my spouse doesn't wander. My mom has never done that. And I always am so grateful for other people in the support group that said, yeah, my husband didn't wander until the first day that he wandered. Or my mom never walked out of the house until the day she walked out and we didn't find her for 3 days. When you see silver alert on the highway, or you get a silver alert on your phone, a lot of times that means that somebody with dementia has even driven away. So be careful. I know that this can be hard, and this is one of the reasons that you want to do the MET exercise if you aren't in the senior living community, or if you don't have home care in your home. You want to be looking in your friend and your family and your neighbor and your faith community network. Who else can help your loved one? Who else can be there to make sure that your loved one's not alone? And even if you never leave the house, I'm guessing that you're probably going to go to the bathroom or take a shower. You're probably going to go into the kitchen and cook while your loved one is maybe taking a nap or watching TV. It's really hard to have your eyes and ears on your loved one all the time. And that's why it is so important to not do it by yourself. And of course, we know Mrs. Reagan was in a position that most of us weren't. She had a lot of financial resources and of course, the Secret Service that most of us don't. But whatever your financial situation is, there are answers, whether it's senior living, whether it's bringing some help into the home, whether it's working with your neighbors and your friends and your family and your faith community to make sure that your loved one isn't by himself or herself. We want to keep him or her safe. Educate yourself and advocate. So this was another important strategy that Mrs. Reagan was so well known for. And again, was really brave at the time, because in the 90s, not a lot of people were talking about Alzheimer's disease. Not a lot of people were open about what they were facing and what they were dealing with. And so Mrs. Reagan learned about the disease and she brought it to the forefront, and she advocated for legislation to help families and persons who have Alzheimer's, and of course brought awareness even to other dementias like Lewy body and frontotemporal and vascular dementia. Alzheimer's disease has been around since 1906, and we are still struggling to get people to educate themselves and advocate. It's been great to observe the wonderful headway that Alzheimer's Association has made, alz.org. They have so many tremendous resources for families and for family caregivers and persons who have dementia. And these and just educational programs. And of course, right now, most of that is virtual, but the support groups are out there. And the thing that's really beautiful about a support group is the support groups, you're going to find yourself getting advice sometimes and giving advice sometimes. And what can be really beautiful for many support groups is even after their loved one passes away or their loved one is in a senior living community, they still are able to give back and share what they have learned. So this is a strategy of Mrs. Reagan's that I hope everybody embraces. And how you educate yourself, all of us educate ourselves in different ways. You might be somebody that reads the book, The 36-Hour Day, or The Validation Breakthrough, or you might be somebody who does really well coming to a virtual, or when we finally get back in person, hopefully sooner rather than later, that we're able to, you're meeting people, you're learning. It might also be that you take online classes that you do at your own pace, and the Alzheimer's Association has so many great classes that you can take. There's wonderful, wonderful movies that I think can really give you some insight, and some that I recommend, are, and again, I'm not going to say that every single thing in all of these movies is completely accurate medically, but to look at maybe the movie The Notebook, and where do you see yourself? Do you see any similarities between yourself and the family caregivers? Away from Her with Julie Christie and Gordon Pinsett. The Still Alice, which Julianne Moore, I believe she won an Academy Award for that it was based on the book Still Alice. The Savages with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Laura Linney, another great movie about dementia. Iris with Kate Winslet. So there are so many, and I'm not saying that you want to take those as medical advice, but it can really open up your horizons and let you think about how the dementia is impacting you, impacting your loved one, impacting the friends and family around you. And sometimes this is a great way to educate others. If you notice that your spouse or your parent is reminding you of a character in a movie, maybe you and some of your family or friends that don't understand the disease, you can recommend that they look at that movie as well. We got people talking about support groups, saying how much they love their support groups. And I know that I'm sure Rochelle can share with you information about support groups if you're interested. that it really can be a true lifesaver for many families. And where you find education, experts like myself and Rochelle and all the people that work in health and mental health and cognitive health, all of us have a lot of experience to share with you. And that's great. And I'm glad that you are willing to hear it from all of us. But at the same time, some of the best learning takes place when you hear from a peer, when you hear from someone that's been there like you have been. And that's one of the reasons I really like talking about Mrs. Reagan's strategies. I don't know that all of them are exactly right for all of us today, but I do think that many of them are, especially educate and advocate. So how have things changed since Mrs. Reagan's caregiving days? Well, a lot has changed. There's a lot more information about dementia. I like to think that the stigma has diminished quite a bit. We also have a lot of people advocating and sharing their stories. And for one, I'm going to talk about HFC for a few moments. HFC, we are hfc.org. It is the nonprofit established by the actor Seth Rogen and his wife, Lauren Miller Rogen. And I actually happen to be on the care advisory board for that nonprofit. And the goal of this nonprofit is they provide grants for people who are taking care of loved ones who have dementia at home. And being on this board, I actually, Lauren Miller Rogen's dad serves on the board as well. And he will talk very openly about he and Lauren's journey taking care of Lauren's mom. So Seth Rogen's mother-in-law had young onset Alzheimer's disease. And some of the challenges that he's talked publicly about is, and one of the reasons that they established HFC, formerly known as Hilarity for Charity, are because when his wife was diagnosed, she was in her 50s. She had young onset, early onset. And so when he would go to a support group, he didn't necessarily connect with others because most of the people were there for their parents. And Lauren Miller Rogen has talked about the same idea with her. When she would go to a support group, it was, if they were talking about a parent, it was the parent was significantly older, and not to say you can't learn from other people that are older, but they just wanted to try to hear from other people. The other thing that the Rogans have talked about is that they realized how incredibly fortunate they were that they were financially able to choose to, if they wanted to keep her home, so they did bring home care in and they could afford to do that. And they realized that not everybody was able to. So part of their mission has been to just try to educate, and they do all kinds of healthy brain initiatives and education about dementia. They also run support groups that are virtual as well. Kimberly Williams Paisley, again, I spoke about her. She wrote a book that I really think is fantastic. It's called Where the Light Gets In. And this book is all about her situation with her mom, who had a young onset type of frontotemporal dementia. And she spoke, when she was getting married to country singer Brad Paisley, was really the first day that she and her family noticed that something was off with her mother. And with frontotemporal dementia, her mom, for a lot of people with frontotemporal dementia, memory loss is not really the first issue that is obvious. This is either more impulse control problems or lack of inhibition. And at the wedding, on the wedding day, the mom said, Mrs. Williams said, I can't believe I don't have a role in your wedding. Your dad's walking you down the aisle. Your siblings are, they're participating in the wedding party and I don't have anything to do. And so they thought that was kind of odd, that was unusual behavior for her. But they said, well, why don't you go ahead and do a reading? And they gave her a reading to do at the last minute. And she was having a hard time following the reading. And that was sort of the first sign. And the book is a very beautiful memoir. And I think it's in particular very helpful for people who are, they have a parent, but also for folks who have a spouse, because Kimberly has talked about her dad dating when her mom was in senior living, that they did utilize senior living, and that dad did need companionship. And it was many, many years into mom's illness, they were all still taking care of her, but that was something that family dealt with. Interestingly, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, she and Pierre LaHue, her writing partner, wrote a book, the Alzheimer's, I believe it's called The Alzheimer's Guide, Dr. Ruth's Guide to Alzheimer's Care. And that is another book that I really recommend. And interestingly, Dr. Ruth, who's not an Alzheimer's expert, but writes her perspective about sexuality and relationships and companionship, and how spouses and partners should not feel guilty about trying to get their companionship needs met elsewhere if that's something that they want to do. So I think we've come a long way. There's a lot, again, with Justice Sandra Day O'Connor talking about her husband, talking about herself, there's been a lot of changes, and there are so many public role models who have shared their stories in a way that can really help people. And we're not going to bring it out into the public light. We're finding that when people are being vulnerable and they're sharing it, it's connecting all of us together. So I want to bring you back to these strategies one more time. And if you would like to share any thoughts or comments again, the commitment to keeping your loved one at home. It's a beautiful concept. It is so physically taxing to do that with dementia. The repeating, the asking the same questions, and then ultimately forgetting how to dress yourself, forgetting how to eat, forgetting how to swallow, and ultimately not being able to get yourself to the bathroom in time or get out of bed. The physical labor that it takes as the disease progresses, it can't be overestimated. And so if you want to look into senior living, you shouldn't have any guilt. So I would say this does not work for everybody. We all promise for different reasons, and oftentimes we don't know what we're exactly promising when we say we'll never place our loved one out of the home. Keeping our loved one out of the public eye in crowds, probably a good idea, even not during COVID, but keeping them totally isolated and away from friends and family, I would say probably not the best idea. Being with your loved one all the time, I would say you need a break, you deserve a break. You are not giving your loved one the best of yourself if you're only with them. You deserve time off. You may remember Diane Rehm from NPR. She wrote a book about her husband's struggle with health issues, and she actually took a cruise while she was caregiving, a cruise on a boat, which I know nobody's really interested in doing right now with COVID and everything. And I thought that was really brave of her to share that she did that. And she was criticized that she went on a cruise with friends while her husband needed care. Of course, left him with responsible help, but you will be refreshed if you take time away. Your loved one deserves your time, but not 100% of it. Your friends, let your friends know you're open to receiving help, but talk to them about their lives as well. Don't leave your loved one at home. Be careful. Your loved one doesn't wander, or doesn't leave the stove on, or doesn't give away their credit card number over the phone until the first time that they do it. And educate yourself, advocate for your loved one, learn in the way that is most comfortable for you. Things have changed a lot. There's a lot that Nancy Reagan did as a pathfinder, as a pioneer in dementia caregiving, and we're grateful for everything she's done. But you know that you can create your own path as a dementia caregiver. There's many, many ways to be a good caregiver, and in particular, many, many ways to be a good and loving dementia caregiver. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much to the Village at Rockville for inviting us to join you today. If you'd like a free copy of Cruising Through Caregiving's first chapter, or you would like the worksheets, please go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com. And last comment, working with your doctors for my care plan, which included changing his medications, was life-changing for me. That's excellent, Joan. I really like what you're saying. You feel refreshed knowing you have that kind of support. He was in denial, and now he is on board. Excellent, Joan. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rochelle to wrap us up. And if anybody has any more comments, questions, examples, we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, we're going to turn it over to Rochelle, but keep those comments and questions coming in. We still have some time.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I just wanted to, this is our final CEU for this year, 2020, and it's been, not CEU, caregiver program. It's been an extreme pleasure learning from Generations Health, and also a pleasure to be able to provide these programs to you, the caregivers in the community, and or if you're a professional, to really strengthen your role as a professional and be able to provide the care to your loved one in an adequate and fulfilling, impactful way. I am open to any questions that anyone may have. You may reach out to me directly. My telephone number is 301-354-8442. Do know if you need placement for your loved one or a client. We do have availability in memory care as well as memory support for both nursing care and assisted living. And be sure to check our website in 2021 for more educational programs and caregiver dementia series. So thanks so much for joining us today, and all the best to you, and see you in 2021. Back to you, Darlene.
Great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jen, for this program. We'll go ahead and we will leave this open for just another moment in case we have any last-minute questions. We do appreciate you joining us today. We will look forward to seeing you again. Gosh, it's hard to believe that it's going to be 2021 already. I hope that if we don't see you before the new year, that you have a wonderful holiday with your loved ones. Take care, everyone. And again, we'll leave this open for just another moment in case you have any last-minute questions. Thanks so much for joining us today.